campus of Stanford University.
People are worried about data. They're worried about their privacy and their security. They should be. We need secure systems.
This is the future of everything.
But we can't have a system that closes that data off. It is too rich of a source of inspiration, innovation, and discovery for new things in medicine.
With your host, Russ Altman.
Today on The Future of Everything, the future of autism. Now, autism is a condition many of us are familiar with, usually diagnosed in childhood, and it's characterized by an unusual series of symptoms: difficulties with social communication and interaction with other people, unusual, sometimes repetitive, sometimes self-destructive patterns of behavior, and difficulty with language. It also has many other co-occurring medical and psychiatric and neurological signs and symptoms. Autism exists on a spectrum, which includes very high-functioning people who even have great achievements, to folks who are severely disabled by the condition and require care 24/7. Now, the causes of autism are complex and include both genetic and perhaps environmental features. I should say that the scientific community is clear that autism is not caused by vaccines. This is my public service announcement. And in fact, there are grave societal consequences to not using vaccines, including terrible infections that can cause very bad morbidity and mortality. This ends the public service announcement. The treatments for autism are difficult and not always successful, but it is clear that early detection and early intervention is best when it is possible. Professor Dennis Wall is a professor of pediatrics, biomedical data science, psychiatry, and behavior science at Stanford University, and he's an expert at using data science and biology to understand, detect, and treat autism. Dennis, I was surprised to learn that the diagnosis of autism is a difficult and complex process, and one that is actually particularly uncomfortable for patients with autism and their parents. But you've done some work to simplify this process.
Right.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. This is awesome.
Love it.
But so I'll explain some of the situation that's in place right now. So the current clinical standard for diagnosis is essentially a one-to-one relationship between clinician and child. It's done at a clinic, with a facility that has all the resources that they think they need at this point in time to diagnose the child. This can take 10, sometimes 17 hours, this process. It can span 2 days. And naturally, as the incidence of autism has risen, which has been dramatic over the last 10 years, let's say maybe 600% rise in incidence, that waiting list grows and grows and grows, creating a bottleneck in the ecosystem that's really difficult to break through.
I can hardly think of any other disease that takes 17 hours of evaluation to diagnose. It's shocking.
It's an amazing series of assessments that include academic psychometrics, behavioral rating scales, speech testing, and then autism-specific testing.
So they're working hard during those 17 hours.
They're working quite hard, and it's quite extensive because a lot of times these kids are clinically challenging, especially if in the windows of developmental trajectories where meeting milestones are different for whatever reason.
What are the other things that they are trying to kind of rule out? In other words, maybe it's autism. What are some of the other things it could be if a kid is having trouble along the lines that I described?
Global developmental delay, which is a fairly diffuse diagnosis, but nevertheless distinct from autism.
And would have different treatments.
And would have different, maybe. I mean, this is another thing that's a little bit arguable in the field, right? The delivery, as far as I know, and I've looked at this quite a bit, there's really not a roadmap to say if this kind of thing is going on, deliver this kind of behavioral therapy. Okay. So they may overlap quite considerably. Other things that are diagnosed within this kind of assessment could be speech delay, just general language issues, communication issues, and so on.
But and not autism.
And not autism.
Okay.
So distinct from autism.
So I derailed you. I'm sorry. So you were saying about how does this diagnosis work and where can we improve it?
So, right. Naturally, this is sort of true in other sectors of medicine where you have clinical established procedures and protocols for care and assessment. They're done in hospitals. But with things like psychiatric conditions and developmental delays, developmental pediatrics in particular, these things are behaviorally assessed, and the behavioral assessments can be done in other ways. And so what we've proposed is that we'd be able to move this out of the clinic into a mobile platform, essentially evaluation of videos provided by parents of their children in their natural environments. This is beneficial for two reasons. One, because it's natural. They're actually behaving the way they normally do at home rather than in an artificial environment like in the clinical setting. And two, because it's mobilized. It's sort of ex-clinical. It sort of goes upstream of and can be done in advance of any particular visit that they would do at a developmental medicine center.
So if I'm understanding you, you're going to take videos, and it's not going to be 17 hours of video. It's going to be a shorter amount which the parents and the kids are both going to love this because they don't have to leave home.
Right.
But that seems to be too magical. So how much video do you need, and how good is it going to be compared to 17 hours of highly trained professionals, yada, yada, yada?
Right. So we've been walking through a series of clinical tests to document the efficacy of this. I'll sort of step back and say, in the spirit of HAI, actually, and
Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, a new initiative at Stanford University.
What we've proposed is that we can not only evaluate on video, but through machine learning methods, we can determine the likelihood of risk for an autism diagnosis in a matter of about 3 minutes.
Great. So take us through it. How does it work?
So what we've proposed first is that, starting at the very beginning, we had access to medical record data that represented the outcome from the administration of the exams that can take 10 to 17 hours, for example. And we had a bolus of such data, enabling us to really apply the lens of machine learning to ask very simple questions like, can we reduce the complexity of the behavioral features needed essentially to arrive at a diagnosis without any loss of accuracy.
So maybe in those 17 hours, there are things that are more valuable and less valuable.
And not surprisingly, there's quite a bit of mutual information among the characteristics that are measured. There's quite a bit of correlation among the features, and so therefore machine learning is very simple, in this case linear classification approaches, are straightforwardly showing us that the feature space can be reduced dramatically.
Which means less questions have to be asked.
Which means less questions need to be asked. And we get a model out of it. So we not only get the feature set, but we get a model to run the features so that we can produce a score that fits a distribution, which is unlike the binary classification that's provided today, by the way. It's not just a yes-no, it's an actual probability score that says you have confidence in this classification, and the classification is trending towards severe, or medium, or mild severity autism. So it becomes beneficial in a number of ways. We went on to propose that we could see these features in video. Naturalized video in the homes of the child, video of the child.
I see. So once you know the smaller number of questions that need to be asked, you can say, are there ways to get the answers to these questions more efficiently than a 17-hour visit to the medical center?
And so we've went through the documentation of that. The third thing that we proposed, after having confirmed that we can in fact see those features in videos that are 1 to 2 minutes in length even, we went on to say that we could get those videos assessed by non-experts, individuals who have not been traditionally trained for the diagnosis of autism, who are not developmental pediatricians.
So these are not highly paid psychiatrists?
They are not. And this paper we just published in the Special Topics in PLOS Medicine, which came out November 27th, showing how we can not only observe the features in videos, but get non-experts to feature tag these features so that we can run the models in a matter of about 4 minutes on average.
This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Dr. Dennis Wall about the diagnosis of autism. I'm sure we're going to get into other topics as well. So that sounds pretty cool. So let me just make sure I got this. The 3-minute video, is this just the video of the kid, or do you prompt the parent to give some challenges of some kind so that you get the kid to do some standard tasks?
We do provide some basic sort of structure and some suggestions like child at play at mealtime, with Legos kinds of things. Some basic ideas, but generally speaking, we don't need to have a tremendous amount of consistent structure as long as the child is doing natural things in their natural setting.
And then the second thing you said is that you were able to find relative non-experts who watch these 3-minute videos and I guess fill out a kind of form of what they see. What kind of things are they noting down in the observation of the child?
Eye contact, response to name, joint attention, social smiling, things like that. If I smile, you smile, that sort of thing.
Right. Normally, that's what I do.
Yes.
So, okay, that's great. So does it work? And are all of the medical centers closing down their diagnostic, which I'm going to guess are also lucrative?
Yes. Well,
where are we in all of this?
So, yes, it absolutely works. The sensitivity and specificity that we were able to show in this paper that I mentioned is 94, 78, respectively. So really at a bar that's clinically acceptable. Next step is, and this is actually being taken forward by a company that I started called Cognoa, is to work through the path of regulatory approval to get this thing listed as a medical device for diagnostic purposes. And it would be the first of its kind.
Would you actually use it for diagnosis, or would you use it to triage the kids who should go get a more detailed evaluation? Or do you think that detailed evaluation might be on the way out?
I do think that there are children who are absolutely clinically challenging, and so triage is a very good way to go with this kind of procedure, because it can say these are the easy yeses, these are the easy nos, and these are the kids in the middle that really are difficult for whatever reason. They're too young, they're in a bilingual household, they're delayed for other reasons. We're not quite sure yet, so we do need to see a specialist to be able to suss out what is going on. But one other, just to comment on this question, which is a great one, I do think general pediatricians are the first line of defense, and generally speaking, they're not performing efficient developmental delay evals. Even though they're recommended to do so by the American Academy of Pediatrics, roughly 33% are doing it.
And my understanding is that this is critical because early detection is the key.
Is key. And so a mechanism like this, a vehicle that's mobilized and powered by efficient machine learning that can render a very robust diagnostic outcome, can be used by pediatricians to enable them to act more efficiently within their 7-minute well baby checks or well child checks, to either refer with confidence or diagnose on the spot. And that's very much what I hope will become the future for this particular system, enabling pediatricians to take action, essentially.
Fantastic. So I know that you also care about the journey of the child after diagnosis and treatment. And you've done some really fun things, in particular with the Google Glass, which we all thought was dead, but it turns out it's not so dead. So in what ways could a pair of glasses possibly be useful for a child with autism?
Yeah, it's another great question, and I guess commenting on that, I do think the diagnostic procedures are really effective, and if we're going to do a better job at diagnosis than we're doing today and drive down the average age from 4.5 to something less, like 2, the last thing we want to do is create another bottleneck on the other side in the healthcare system, and so therapeutic access has to be there.
Yes.
And that's why we pivoted our attention towards developing mobilized mechanisms, because like with diagnosis, access to therapy is delayed. There's waiting lists, and those are only getting longer.
Can you paint a picture of the traditional treatment protocols?
The traditional treatment protocols are one-to-one, again, clinical practitioner to child, typically with what's called discrete trial training, where they're showing the child sort of images of emotions, so facial expressions. Here's an individual who's angry, with flashcards on paper, and doing it over and over and over again until they master the angry emotion and move to the happy emotion.
So this is addressing the deficit in social communication,
exactly.
Reading faces. This is one of their...
One of the main deficits with which children with autism, I think, unanimously struggle is with making social overtures, understanding social overtures, engaging in social scenarios, making eye contact, and understanding what faces are telling them.
This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Dennis Wall, and he was just telling us about the traditional ways to treat, which is basically flashcards.
Yes. And so we wanted to really which are effective, by the way. But children can progress off the autism spectrum if this kind of behavioral training is done extensively.
So I should say flashcard with respect.
Exactly. This is quite an effective system. However, its administration is spotty, and its access is difficult. Access to it is difficult, and so it's not scalable, generally speaking, and it can be not general. It has this issue of non-generalizability. If the angry face is bearded, the child may maladaptively associate beardedness with angriness. So there's a lack of natural elements to it. It can't capture the variation in the human expression sort of landscape. You just can't do it on flashcards.
Right. We're seeing a lot of faces, and a lot of things are going on.
It's right, exactly, and not everyone has the same mechanism for smiling. And so what we propose to do is to use computer vision, artificial intelligence, to move what is an effective system out of the clinic again onto a form factor that's augmented reality, not virtual or mixed reality, but augmented reality, Google Glass, so that we can let children experience their social worlds better in their natural environments. And so what it does is it provides them with a cue to look to faces, and when they find a face, they get a prompt that says, "Good job, you found a face."
You're saying that on the glasses, you're kind of projecting, they're looking at you or me, but they're also getting some other information in their visual field
That's
from
right.
the glass.
In the peripheral visual field, which really does become peripheral, almost momentarily. It's quite effective. It just sits off like Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder.
And what do they
essentially.
see? What do
They
they
see
see?
a green box in the prism, which is the heads-up display, which indicates you found a face. And immediately thereafter, they get an emoji or emoticon that tells them what kind of face it is. So a happy, sad,
So you have
surprised.
figured out. So this is where artificial intelligence technology has been used to pre-process the face and say Russ is looking angry.
Right.
And then you cue that to the child.
Right. And so that, while it sounds relatively simplistic, is incredibly effective. So in fact, so much so, in fact, after a randomized controlled trial, which we just completed, children are shown to get quite a bit better on a standard outcome measure. This paper will publish in JAMA Pediatrics on March 25th, showing documenting really the first ever, that I know of anyways, demonstration of efficacy of a digital therapy for this particular condition.
So this is a little bit of a side comment, but the economic future of Google Glass, is my understanding, was very unclear. But it just sounds like you just found that a remarkably useful application.
Absolutely.
For it. So are you stuck because you need Google Glass to exist, or are there going to be other ways to deliver the same kind of thing through other?
So we were very deliberate in making this system software that's agnostic to the form factor, essentially, the augmented reality form factor. While we believe we looked at a bunch of different off-the-shelf offerings, there are many, by the way. This is becoming a more ubiquitous technology as we speak. Sport goggles and things like that that snowboarders like to use to see how fast they're going when they're going down the slopes is an augmented form factor.
So that helps because maybe you can commandeer one of these.
Right, and so another thing that was interesting is we learned right away that the Google Glass itself wasn't powered enough to actually run the AI that we built. And so we ported to a phone, built an app, and became totally independent of the glass form factor. It's now a vehicle for message passing. Mm-hmm. It's watching the world, it's getting images, passing that to the phone's doing the processing and sending back some feedback in real time. So we know we can port to other augmented reality form factors, and it's exactly what we're doing now.
So how do we deliver this? This sounds fantastic, and it sounds like you even have a clinical trial. This is not pretend. The kids are responding well to it.
This is real.
Can we expect to see these kinds of treatments out in the world in the next couple of years?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, as augmented reality becomes more ubiquitous, which will happen, Apple's developing things, other companies are developing things on the market, these will become really commodity items that are in the homes of everyone, just like phones in many ways, and we can port to all of those phones as software, as a medical device.
This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. More with Dr. Dennis Wall about autism diagnosis, treatment, and the future next on SiriusXM Insight 121.
What are you going to do? You're going to go to Google and you're going to type in
The Future of Everything with Russ Altman from the campus of Stanford University.
Welcome back to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Dr. Dennis Wall about autism and the future of autism. It came to our attention that people might be not familiar with Google Glass, and so let me just say Google Glass is a pair of glasses that you can wear, but that can project things on the glass so that while you're looking at the world around you, you're also seeing at the periphery computer-generated display, and that is the basic technology that was used in our previous discussion. But Dennis, I wanted to ask about where your interest in autism comes from.
From my family. My wife's sister, Becky, is on the spectrum. She's a severe form of autism. I've known her since I was a teenager. She's largely the inspiration behind all of this. I've been working on it for a bunch of years from different angles, but motivated by Becky. Basically.
So as a family member with a loved one with autism, can you describe the kinds of challenges and perhaps the rewards of having someone in the family with autism?
Well, I think it teaches all of us an appreciation for differences, which is really important for my children. It's one of the things that we try to instill in them every day, and Becky is a big source of that training and teaching. Becky's severity is high, so there are a lot of comorbid kind of symptoms, including self-mutilation and other things. She's very, she can be nonverbal, she can be destructive, things like that that create challenges, obviously, for a number of things, being able to go places, do things. And so it has impacted, of course, Abby, my wife, her family very, very seriously in a lot of positive and, not so positive ways.
Now, I don't want to violate the health privacy of your sister-in-law, but can I ask, how early on was she diagnosed, and is some of the work that you're doing, could it have changed her trajectory as you think about what you're doing now and what was available when she was diagnosed?
It's a great question. She was diagnosed actually quite young relative to the current average age of diagnosis, and she was diagnosed by professionals in Boston who were really at the time the only ones really well equipped to do it, the best in the field, so to speak. And so she was lucky in that regard. The severity of her autism is such that she's not it's unlikely that she would have been accessible to certain things like Google Glass.
Like the Google Glass would be hard just logistically to get her to wear.
Get it. But, I say this having, she's now aged, she's 36, and it's sort of too late, I hate to say it, for her. Now it's about management. Right. But a lot of these other kids, that's what the inspiration is about. The kids like Becky who are 4, yes, we can get to those kids. And if we give them a pair of glasses and maybe a social engagement game that we'll talk about perhaps, then these children will learn a lot more about their social world and engage in that world. And once they do that, it'll unlock layers of the onion that enable them to grow more on their own.
Fantastic. So yes, I did want to ask you about a game that you've kind of invented. It's called Guess What? It's an iPhone game, and I believe it's related to Ellen DeGeneres' game, whose name I can't remember. But can you tell me the story of how Ellen DeGeneres kind of leads to a interaction therapeutic tool for autism?
Well, yes, absolutely. Her game, at least popularized by Ellen DeGeneres, is called Heads Up, and I love it. We play it a lot when we were traveling.
And can you just describe it for us?
It's a game that runs on phones. In this case, I think both Android and iOS. But you put the phone on you choose a deck from a selection. Let's say African Safari.
Okay.
And once you hit that, it starts the engagement. You put the phone on your forehead, and your job is to act like.
So you can't see it.
I can't see it, but you can. Your job is to act like a giraffe. And
I
if
see.
I
so
guess
it's charades. But the charade is coming from an iPhone, and you're supposed to be guessing what your iPhone is showing.
Exactly. And if I get it, if you can convince me correctly, and I can imitate the giraffe well enough that I guess it, I tip the phone down, passes to the next prompt, and suddenly you're acting like a lion.
Yes, I believe now that you've said this, I think I've been asked to play this game.
What's amazing about this is it's social, inherently social. It doesn't distract the person from making eye contact. In fact, you need to make eye contact because you want to create a connection.
You're killing me here. You're not giving me a good giraffe.
Yes, exactly. And so there's that facial engagement, there's eye contact, and there's imitation. All of these things are fundamental components of the autism behavioral training programs.
So Guess What is different from Heads Up?
It is different from Heads Up for reason largely inspired by Heads Up. We didn't want to use the name Heads Up for trademark issues.
Of course.
But would be happy if Ellen DeGeneres wants to give us a call and sort of support the system.
You heard it here, Ellen.
Nevertheless, what we decided to do is turn the camera on. So we're not only creating the opportunity for a social engagement and an opportunity to see the child's ability to see faces.
Now I got to ask: is the child the one holding the phone, or the one playing trying to act out the giraffe?
The mom in these scenarios is the parents or care providers are holding the phone, and the child is attempting to act out what's going on.
Okay.
And so that imitation tells us not just about their ability to understand the prompt, that it's an angry face, for example, but that they have some sort of inherent physiological understanding of that emotion, so much so that they can convince the person that they're angry.
Wow.
And so it gives us a whole layer that's very different from what we can get from Glass. But the data collection becomes an incredibly powerful secondary benefit of the system.
Yes, I distracted you, but you had said that now mom's phone is not only showing the word giraffe, but is taking movies of the child.
And it's a structured movie. So unlike what we've done previously with diagnostics, right? We're using natural video with relatively low levels of structure. Here we're getting egocentric, full facial image data of the child attempting to do something social. And it's incredibly enriched for the features that we need for diagnostic purposes, but it's also enriched for computer vision labels that we can use in the future to build better models. So it becomes this action to data feedback loop, a system through which we can deliver care while capturing data on which we can build better models in the future.
Wow. So I'm playing this game. There's a video of me. That video may be useful for diagnostic purposes. It might be used to monitor the progress of therapy, I'm guessing, that as you get better at guess what, that actually means your autism symptoms are getting better. This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Dennis Wall about some of the amazing uses of augmented reality and technology.
Gamification technology.
Gamification in order to identify and now treat autism. So the analytic challenge of those movies, you said that in your first story that you told us, you had trained people to look at the videos, the natural videos for diagnostic purposes, and fill out a checkbox of eye contact and whatnot. But now I think what you just said a moment ago was that you're now thinking about having AI systems that can automatically analyze the video?
Absolutely, yes. And so the reason why, like I said, I'll give you one kind of straightforward example. The moment in time where the gameplay corresponds with a sort of a rough label that you can generate on the image data of the child attempting to act out, the moment of time that when they correspond is a 2-point indication that the labeling of that is accurate. So let's say it's a happy emoji that's on the screen.
Happy.
Child successfully acts happy. A rough labeler, a noisy labeler says probably happy. When those two things correspond, we can automatically deposit that labeled image data into a repository that represents examples of children emoting happy. And with that, we can build emotion classifiers that are tailored to children. Because right now, the computer vision libraries that we have available to us are highly enriched for actors who are adults.
Right.
And so Google Glass, our system, currently
Beautiful
runs
people who are trained actors, but now we're going to have a database of young children acting happy.
Yes. And like with any system in computer vision and AI, you're only as good as the examples you can give it.
Right.
And the numbers of examples you can give it. And this is the promise of deep learning. There is promise, quite a bit of promise. Look at Google Inception. This is an incredible system. But if you're not able to give good examples of the kinds of things you're focusing on, which in this case is emotions in children, for example, or in social abilities in children, then we're not going to get there. And so the labeling, and moreover, this human in the loop requirement is a challenge.
It's very expensive.
It's
and
very
so
expensive.
You now have a model for getting this data.
Minimizing the manual labor required to generate a repository upon which we can build a deep learning model.
So just popping up, do you believe that these technologies will have applications outside of autism? Are there other behavioral, psychiatric, neurological diagnoses that might be able to benefit from these same technologies? And what are they? Paint a little picture of the future for us.
Absolutely. I think
that's what we're all about.
That's right. I think many of the deficits in developmental pediatrics are addressable with this exact same paradigm, this action to data on ubiquitous devices kind of paradigm. That includes ADHD, developmental delays of speech, of general development, of things that are associated with reading deficits. Dyslexia in particular is an addressable area where we can not only detect through systems like this, but also intervene.
So this is just the beginning. Thank you for listening to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. If you missed any of this episode, listen anytime on demand with the SiriusXM app.